She thought she was confronting betrayal. In reality, she was about to destroy 3 lives: her own, her ex-boyfriend's, and the innocent woman in the passenger seat. It was on February 15, 2025 at Jacksonville, Florida. It happened in seconds. One pull of the trigger. One flash of fire. One bullet tearing through flesh. The woman in the passenger seat never saw it coming. Blood pooled, a body slumped forward, and the city of Jacksonville was left with a crime that made no sense. The shooter didn't run. She didn't hide. She stood there staring, breathing heavy, hands trembling, because in that moment she realized something that made the crime even more horrifying. She had just shot the wrong woman. This wasn't an act of revenge. This wasn't justice. This was a mistake, a deadly, irreversible mistake. Latorray Collins thought she was confronting a betrayal. She thought she was staring into the eyes of the woman who had stolen the man she loved. But the truth? It was far more tragic than anything she had imagined. So what led to this moment? What pushed a woman to follow her ex, to track his every move, to pull up beside his car at a stoplight, weapon in hand, ready to end a life? What happens when heartbreak turns to obsession? And what happens when that obsession ends with a bullet? The truth behind this crime is darker than anyone could have expected. And by the time Latorray Collins realized the truth, it was already too late. Welcome to True Crime Stories videos. I welcome you, my viewers, and most especially my subscribers, for your support as we keep improving and bringing you daily told and untold true crime stories. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Latorray Collins was never the kind of woman to walk away quietly. She loved hard. She fought for what was hers. And when something slipped through her fingers, she held on tighter. Maybe too tight. Her relationship with her ex-boyfriend wasn't perfect, but in her mind, it wasn't over. Not yet. She had given him years of her life. Time, love, effort. She believed it meant something. She believed she meant something. But love can turn ugly. And when it did, it left behind something far more dangerous: obsession. The breakup wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was cold, distant. He simply pulled away little by little until one day he wasn't there anymore. No explanation. No closure. Just a feeling. That feeling when you know someone is slipping away and no matter how hard you try to hold on, they're already gone. And then the final blow. Latorray had been holding on to his things: clothes, shoes, little reminders of what they used to be. Maybe deep down she thought he'd come back for them. Maybe she thought he'd come back for her. But when she reached out, his response was simple: throw them away. That was it. No emotion. No hesitation. Just words that cut deeper than any knife. Throw them away. Like they meant nothing. Like she meant nothing. Something inside her cracked. At first it was just anger. A quiet storm building inside her. But anger has a way of growing, twisting, turning into something else. Something darker. She started watching him. Checking his social media. Driving by places she knew he'd be. She told herself it was just curiosity, but deep down she needed to know. She needed to see. Then one night she did. There he was. In a car that wasn't his. And beside him, another woman. Laughing. Talking. Sitting in the seat that used to be hers. Her hands clenched the steering wheel. Her heart pounded in her chest. She didn't know the woman. But she didn't have to. She had seen enough. Her mind raced. How long had this been going on? Was this why he left? Had he been lying to her this whole time? Everything she thought she knew about him, about them, it was all a lie. And at that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the past. Not the consequences. Only one thing mattered now. She had to confront him. She had to make him feel what she was feeling. And she wasn't leaving without answers. The night was supposed to be like any other. But for Latorray Collins, it was the night everything changed. She wasn't looking for trouble. Not at first. She had spent the whole day replaying his words in her head. Throw them away. 3 simple words, but they burned like fire. She couldn't let it go. That's why she was out driving, circling the streets, her thoughts tangled in anger, hurt, and something she couldn't name. She wasn't stalking him. No, she just needed to see him. To understand. And then, like fate, there he was. A car she didn't recognize. A woman she had never seen before. And her ex-boyfriend, sitting in the driver's seat like nothing had ever happened. Like the life they built together had never even mattered. Latorray's hands clenched the steering wheel. Her stomach twisted. Her mind raced. Was this why he left? Was this who he had been with all along? She didn't need answers anymore. She already knew. The light turned green. The car pulled forward. And without thinking, Latorray followed. She told herself she just needed a closer look. Just a few more seconds to make sure. But the seconds stretched. The miles passed. And still she didn't stop. Her heart pounded. Her breath was shallow. This woman. This stranger. She was in the seat that used to be hers. She was laughing, smiling, touching the man that used to be hers. Latorray's fingers tightened on the wheel. Her ex wasn't even looking in the mirror. He had no idea she was behind him. She could feel the heat rising in her chest, the pressure building in her head. It wasn't fair. It wasn't supposed to end like this. The road ahead was empty. The traffic light turned red. Latorray saw her chance. She yanked the wheel, cutting across lanes, stopping just inches from the front of his car. She blocked him in. There was nowhere to go. And finally he saw her. His face changed. First confusion. Then something else. A flicker of fear. Good. She threw open her car door. Her blood was boiling, her vision blurred. The passenger window was down just enough for her to see the woman's face, to hear her voice. And that's when she lost control. Words flew from her mouth, accusations, rage, everything she had been holding inside. Her ex shouted back, telling her to leave. The woman in the passenger seat shrank back, looking between them, caught in the storm. Latorray's heart pounded against her ribs. The blood in her veins felt like fire. Her ex didn't care. He never cared. And now he was trying to dismiss her like she was nothing. The rage took over. Her hand reached down. The cold weight of the gun pressed against her palm. She didn't think. She didn't plan. She just raised it. 1 second. One pull of the trigger. A flash of light. A crack of sound. And then silence. Her ex-boyfriend's eyes went wide. The woman gasped, her body jerking forward. Blood soaked through her shirt, dark and fast. And just like that, it was done. Latorray stood there, frozen. The gun felt heavy in her hands. The red light above her bathed everything in a sick, eerie glow. And then, the most horrifying realization of all. She knew that face. That wasn't his new girlfriend. That wasn't the woman he had replaced her with. It was someone else. Someone who had nothing to do with their breakup. Latorray's breath caught in her throat. She had just shot the wrong woman. The gunshot was still ringing in her ears. Latorray Collins stood there, frozen. Her chest rose and fell in sharp, shallow breaths. The streetlight above cast a cold, red glow over everything. Over the car, over the blood, over the woman slumped in the seat. A mistake. A deadly mistake. She took a step back. Her hands trembled. The gun, still warm, felt heavier than ever. Her ex was screaming now. His voice raw with panic. Calling a name over and over again. Not a lover's name. Not the name of some woman he had left her for. Latasha. Stay with me. Stay with me. The name cut through her like a blade. Latasha Taylor. Not his girlfriend. His cousin. Latorray's breath hitched. No, this couldn't be real. Her eyes darted to the woman in the seat, barely conscious, blood staining her hands as she clutched her stomach. The truth crashed down on her all at once. She had spent weeks, maybe months, drowning in rage. Obsessing. Watching his every move. And in the end, she had gotten it all wrong. Her stomach twisted. Her vision blurred. The distant sound of sirens snapped her back to reality. She had to go. She turned and ran. Every step felt heavy, like the pavement was pulling her down. The world around her was a blur. Streetlights, passing cars, people turning their heads, sirens getting louder. But none of it mattered. She had to get away. Her car was just a few feet away. She yanked the door open, hands slick with sweat, fingers fumbling for the keys. Then, flashing lights. Blue and red. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. The sirens were deafening now. She slammed the door shut. Pressed her foot to the gas. Tires screeched as she sped away, her pulse hammering, hands gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she had to run. But deep down she already knew the truth. She couldn't outrun this. Because back at that intersection, paramedics were fighting to keep Latasha alive. And the police? They already had her name. They already knew who she was. The city was watching. The world was watching. And there was nowhere left to hide. 1 second. That's all it took. 1 second of rage. 1 second of blind emotion. 1 second that could never be taken back. Latorray Collins thought she had lost everything when her relationship ended. But that night at the stoplight she lost even more. She lost her freedom. She lost her future. And worst of all, she took away someone else's. Latasha Taylor survived. Barely. The bullet tore through her body, leaving scars, physical and emotional, that would never fully heal. She was just a passenger that night. Just sitting in a car, unaware that someone else's heartbreak had turned into a weapon pointed at her. She wasn't a rival. She wasn't a threat. She was family. And for Latorray, that truth was unbearable. After she fled the scene, she tried to disappear. But the city was already looking for her. The police had her name. The news had her face. And the moment her car was spotted, it was over. The arrest wasn't violent. There was no struggle. Just cold metal cuffs snapping around her wrists and the slow, crushing weight of reality setting in. She didn't fight. Because there was nothing left to fight for. The courtroom was silent when the verdict was read. Attempted murder. A crime fueled by obsession, by jealousy, by the belief that if she couldn't have him, no one else should. But the truth? He was never hers to keep. He had moved on. And now, because she couldn't let go, she would spend years behind bars, locked away, left with nothing but regret. A single moment. A single shot. And just like that, her entire life was gone. This is the reality of unchecked emotions. Jealousy doesn't just burn, it consumes. Obsession doesn't just hurt, it destroys. And rage? Rage doesn't ask questions. It doesn't pause to think. It doesn't care about truth. It just takes. And once it does, there's no going back. So ask yourself, when the moment of rage comes, when your heart is pounding, when your hands are shaking, when all you want is revenge, will you stop? Or will you let 1 second decide the rest of your life? Because in the end, a single second of rage can cost a lifetime of regret.